Hi everyone, we are here with Miss Elaine Spearman. She attends First Methodist Church, and I just respect her so much. And I thought the best thing we could do during this time is listen to our friends and hear what they have to say about what's going on with racism and that type of thing. And I asked her, I said, can you tell us your story? So she's here to tell some of her life and just some insight. So I'm gonna just step back and listen.
Hello, I appreciate the opportunity to be with you, and I appreciate Pastor Andy thinking enough of me to think that I even have a story to tell, because all of us have a story to tell. I am Elaine Harris Spearman, attorney at law, retired, thankfully, and have returned to my hometown, which is where I started from. Anything and everything that I am today is based upon my life here, growing up in Gadsden, Alabama. I know you may think that's a stretch, but it's the truth. I know that I have a story, you have a story, and what we have to always remember is whatever story you tell, someone will have a different version of it than do you, although you may have experienced much of the same thing. I grew up here in Gadsden, Alabama. I attended school here. And of course, the educational system when I attended was totally segregated. Everyone, without fail, went to, for your high school years, Carver High School, which is now gone, but there is a monument to the school. And the monuments that I see to Carver High School are the graduates, as they have scattered from Gadsden, Alabama, all over the world. We have shown many people that because you grew up in the segregated South, the schools were separate but not equal. It doesn't mean that you did not get a good education. As a matter of fact, when I attended law school in the city of St. Louis University, teachers used to ask me where did I go to high school and to college, because they could not believe that I had gone to an all-black elementary, all-black high school, and then went to a historically black college, Tennessee State University. But I get ahead of myself because as I lived in Gadsden, Alabama, I had teachers that cared about what happened to me. They cared about how I behaved. They cared about how I spoke. So I had a good foundation for anything that I decided to do, because my teachers let me know that I could be anything that I wanted to be, could go anywhere that I wanted to go. My teachers actually attended my church, so I was therefore a student who could never get away with anything. My teachers would immediately tell my parents any and everything that I did that was out of order at school. It was none of that, not my child, not my baby. If the teacher said I did it, I had done it. And not only did I get the punishment from the teachers, the school system, I had double punishment from my parents. I know we live in a different day now, but this is my story. I went to Sweet Home United Methodist Church all of my life. I have been a Methodist and know nothing else. I probably know every hymn in the hymnal And I love to sing them because they bring back beautiful memories. But the thing that I have come to realize is I went to an all black Methodist church. Whenever we visited another Methodist church in Alabama, it was an all black church. I attend First United Methodist Church downtown Gadsden now. It is an all white church. So sometimes I have to try to reconcile myself with where I am and what's happening to me and why is it this way. We're all Methodist. The hymnals are the same. I know I can tell you 378 is Amazing Grace. That was my father's favorite hymn. Even if we were not singing it at church, he would turn to me and continuously point at the page. So my sister and I have just grown up knowing page 378. So that's just part of some of the questions that I sometimes have as I have gone through attending church and the church being the focal point of the community, particularly the African American community. I was a young person, but when the NAACP became very active in the very early 60s, meetings were held at the churches and they would be packed. I found it so exciting. I don't know why, but I felt something in the air. I said, this is exciting. Oh my goodness. Well, our teachers at Carver High felt the same thing. These were young teachers who really, many of them had just graduated from college. And they knew that something needed to change, that it wasn't right. So in the course of all of this, Julian Bond came to Gadsden, came to our neighborhood. We were very excited running around because we had people from elsewhere who were telling us that things could be better. Dr. King had impressed me because I said, oh my goodness, he's telling us that we can make a difference. And he did focus upon youth. So my teachers understood the message and they imparted that message to us. So that day in 1963, I graduated from high school when I was 15 years of age. So that day in 1963, our teachers sent us out to march into the community, to sit in where we were not allowed to sit in. We could shop, but never sit. We could spend money, but never pause. You could have water, but it was at a fountain that said colored and white. I always had an odd feeling that didn't seem right to me. But being a young person, I couldn't think it all the way through. So that's why we had such great teachers. They did. So I was just looking at an article in Sunday's Gadsden Times about an icon closing downtown on Broad Street. That icon was McClellan's. That's what I knew that store to be. That's where I actually sat in. We had gone through NonViolent Training. Dr. King, Reverend Dr. King, sent people to all cities to train young people as to how we should react when people would walk behind your back with cigarettes, threatening to burn you and calling you names. We were trained in nonviolence that we were not to react, no matter if we were burned. You were not to react, not to um, have a lot to say. That was different then than now. But that is exactly what we did. But I noticed that that part of the history of McClellan's was missing from that article. Maybe there is not a desire to mention that African American young people were arrested from there by the sheriff. He told us several times, get up, get out, leave. We didn't because that's not what we were there to do, to leave. We were seated at the counter. And of course, we were all arrested because he said we failed to obey a lawful order. Well, we all were arrested, taken away. I spent 11 days in the lovely city jail down here on the riverfront, but of course I never noticed that it had a beautiful view from a sail. But while we were there, I stayed there 11 days. Of course, the times differentiated among my classmates, differing times. Well, my parents were most upset, told me I was coming home. I said no, because Dr. King said we must stay. And they were very angry. I stayed. So when we were finally released, Dr. King came to the jail to see us, but only a few were able to actually meet with him because of the climate. And in fact, the jailer said, sorry to say this, that nigger king is here. This is what we heard, we endured it. But we were not supposed to have any records because of this, but for a long time, I never would talk about it in St. Louis. And when I decided to go to law school, when I filled out mountains and mountains of forms and papers, I never mentioned it because people react to things differently, and I felt that I was never sure that was not made a part of my record. But we endured that, and my family has been involved in civil rights. My uncle, the Reverend Dr. William B. McLean, actually had a Methodist Church in Anniston, Alabama. He had gone away to the theological seminary after graduation from Clark and came back to his home area to try to make a difference. He was one of the people who was beaten on the steps of the Anniston Library there. There were other ministers with him. And Reverend Phil Noble, I believe that's his name, of the Presbyterian faith there, they all worked together and formed a group to try to improve things. In fact, he wrote a book, I believe it's The Burning Bus. My Uncle Bobby wrote the foreword to that he talks about their experience. And he's been back here several times, so some of this is kind of in my blood. I'm not the first college graduate in my family. In fact, my cousin Kathleen, who was an older adult when I was young, was a graduate of Alabama A&M, probably I think in about 1946, and was the superintendent of schools for Turkeytown. So my life was my sister and I had to spend 2 weeks every summer at Cousin Kathleen's. Even though we lived in Gadsden, and so did she, my father and mother felt that she could teach us about manners, how to behave, just things that she thought we needed to know because she knew better and had lived and learned. So, aside from Vacation Bible School, which we attended religiously. But of course we loved it because they had snacks and you just had a generally good time. That was part of our summer routine. Most of our lives when we were younger and upwards. So those are things that I can remember that mean a lot to me. My parents have given me some life lessons. And a major thing my father instilled in me is truth telling. I probably have the biggest problem with people who won't tell the truth, no matter what it is. I had a very prime example of knowing how the truth helps you out. My father, remember I graduated from high school when I was 15. I was in the 12th grade, and I had gone someplace with my aunt, his sister, that I probably should not have gone, but she took me. Well, someone called my dad and told him about it. He asked me that Saturday when he was at the church working. Daddy did everything for the church. He was the carpenter, the secretary, the janitor. He was whatever it was, you name it. That's what Dad was. But we worked hard on Saturday, and I always got a chance to go shopping. I stopped at the church for my little handout, and Dad asked me, Elaine, were you at so-and-so last night? Fear struck my heart because I knew he had to know that I was. So I couldn't lie. I said, well, why are you asking me that, Daddy? Elaine, were you there? I said, yes. He said, well, you just go home. Go back home. I couldn't believe it. My shopping. What about that? I had to go all the way back home. By then we lived in East Gadsden. We came from the west side originally. But I had to go all the way back home. And he said, you just wait until I get home. So I lived in fear the whole afternoon until he finished, just awaiting my terrible whipping. But the worst thing was he didn't do it. He came in and he told me, Elaine, I just want to tell you, your having told me the truth has saved you. You didn't try to deny it, say you didn't go, and you didn't do it. He said, I will deal with my sister for doing it. But you are spared this day because you told the truth. And I have to say, that is a lesson that has stayed with me. And I'm older now, but that's been throughout my career. I have believed that telling the truth about whatever it is the best thing any individual could do. And as I had gone to jail, of course, I was very late applying for college because I had gotten insolent and decided that we had gone to New York for a family trip. I decided I was not going to college. I wanted to go and stay with my cousin in New York because I had the best time of my life. I thought could really be grown there. I said, oh, this is it, New York. Oh, well, my father again told me, Elaine, you're not going to New York, and you're not going to leave this house unless you're going to college. I spent a month crying because we had already graduated. I hadn't applied to any college. What am I going to do? So I had to do what he said. But don't I thank God this day that he didn't let me do what I wanted to do, what I thought was best. I'm grateful every day that I look at my life. And I have lived in St. Louis. I recently came back to the place of my birth in 2016. It was a hard decision because I didn't think I wanted to return to the place from whence I came. I did not believe that it could be any better than it was when I lived here. I know some things had changed, but I would come home. I never was a person that went away and never came home. I was home every holiday, parents' birthdays, all of that. But one thing I never would do is I never would go inside of McClellan's. I never would enter the door. One time I tried, and I started breathing very hard. I couldn't stand it. So it's only in the recent years since I have come home that I have even darkened that door, as we say down south. But I was afraid. I felt feelings rushing upon me that brought back memories that I didn't want to think about. I didn't want to remember it. In St. Louis, I had a great career. I decided to go to law school. And I tell you, that wasn't easy. Law school is difficult. I won't try to pretend that it's not. It's as hard to get in as it is to stay in and to graduate. My class had about 190 students, about 11 of which were African American. By the time we graduated, I believe there were 5 of us. Those students, with that smaller number, had all failed. Do I know whether it was their fault or what we had to experience? I could not say. But it's not easy and it's difficult. And this was probably one of the first times that I actually worked closely with whites my own age. We had to have study groups. All of us wanted to survive. We wanted to graduate. So necessity, creates a lot of things. It was necessary for us to be together because we had a common goal. And I think that's one of the things I look at now with what is going on. I see a lot of people coming together because they have a common goal somehow. And I guess because people are coming to grips with what is happening. Now, African Americans have known that these things existed for a very long time. I've been a victim of it. Many people that I know have. And it doesn't matter whether I'm educated or not. That's not what guides some of what happens to African Americans. It's strictly and simply the color of your skin, which is what makes all of this so bad. African Americans don't want handouts. They don't want change just because you want to see an African American hold an office or be in charge. What you want is an equal opportunity, fairness, the opportunity to be in leadership, the opportunity to have your voice heard. Not that it has to be you, because all black people are not all right, and all white people are not all wrong, and vice versa. It has to do with respecting who we all are and appreciating the fact that we are different, but we have more in common. And I know people use that phrase all the time. We have more in common than we do differences, but it's a fact. Many people that I speak with now grew up just as I did. They're white. They grew up with the same family values, their parents wanting the best for them, the family wanting people in the family to be educated, respect the fact that you grew up in the church, respect your teachers and the fact that they're there to educate you. We have not always believed that police officers are all bad and are all there to hurt you. But the experience for African Americans gives you a different view of police behavior. You will just never believe the times that I have been pulled over. And I said, why? What have I done? What is it? And the flimsiness sometimes are the excuses. But what you come to realize is police officers many times act under their own guidelines for you need to have a certain number of stops. You need to have unsolicited buildup of your record if you want to move to the next level. So police officers unfortunately learn early in their career that 8 times out of 10, if you stop an African American, there will be something in his history or that may cause you to get your right up. Is there a warrant out for him? Is he driving on a suspended license? So the pullover, that's what's so bad. The pullover is just because you're African American. But there's a greater purpose for that. And officers learn it early. And it's unfortunate, but it's true. And I'm glad to see the diversity of people who are coming to realize that this is not fiction. And what some white people need to realize is you are as much at risk in many cases as an African American. You say, why? I'm okay. I'm privileged. I haven't had this happen. But remember, if you start empathizing, sympathizing with those who are the underdog, that's what you become. You become a lover of the underdog. And I will not use the phrase that I have heard used so many times to describe a fair-minded, decent person of another race simply because they know it's unfair and they have the temerity to stand up and say that's not fair. But as I have come to grips with so many things and still attend the United Methodist Church, I realize that some things within our own church has not changed. And the Methodist Church has been a haven for African Americans for a very long time. Some people may not have realized that when you look back at John Wesley and the founders of the AME Zion Church, the AME Church and the AME Zion Church, you will find that they preached, the slaves listened. Slaves felt that that message was simple, understandable, and fair. So African Americans have been involved and been members of the Methodist faith for an extremely long time, although many times if you attend our Methodist churches now, you wouldn't believe that because they are so segregated. And it's all black Methodist or all white Methodist. Let a black Methodist cross over into the white Methodist church. You're looked at in shock. But all of it, all of our doctrines, all of our songs, and the one thing I like, our pastors are trained. They attend a theological seminary. I appreciate that. Most African Americans do, who have chosen the Methodist Church. The Methodist Church was one of the first early churches who fought against and spoke out against slavery. So when you know all of these things and you look at us today, you wonder what happened to it. What happened to the people who actually stood for that? I think that sometimes people don't respect the differences in how people worship. I tend to be a speak outer, if you will, when the pastor is really making a point, a salient point, one that I can relate to, that I know is true. I am an amener. Oh, I'll amen in a minute. Oh, I get emotional when I hear those beautiful hymns that remind me of what we've all been through. And I tell you, I think that the Methodist Church has been rather quiet. We don't want to be Baptist. I don't want to be Baptist because that's not what I was reared to be. I don't like the hooping and the hollering. I like a good sermon, a beginning, a middle, and an end. Let me be the one to get emotional. Sometimes the pastor does. I love that because that means he believes exactly what he is preaching. And I feel emotional about it because of the words, because I'm sitting somewhere where sometimes nobody's saying anything. And I feel sometimes that they're letting it go over their head, that he's not talking about me. I'm not one of those people, but you are. Because I've had an opportunity to be emotional, but really didn't have a real reason why that I could articulate to you. It was just being overcome about God's goodness to me, His graciousness, His assisting me in traveling this long journey that I've been on from Gadsden to Tennessee State to St. Louis and all those jobs, all those careers, and then right back to where I started from. But I made it. I managed. But I believe it was God's grace and mercy. So sometimes I'm overcome by that. And I've had the opportunity to sit in church and be overcome by it and have someone ask me in a very irritated, I can't take any more of this kind of voice, is there something really wrong? I was taken aback, but I said, not really. I'm just thankful to God for what He's done for me. Nothing else was said. So we have a lot to overcome. We have a lot to do with each other. And we have a lot to grow with. All of us together, because at the end of the day, we are all in this together, however you look at it. So the better we are to each other and with each other, the better this world will be for those who are coming behind us. Thank you, and God bless you.